Starfield's newest expansion is here, and it's already performing miracles. A 12-year-old boy who was in a coma for 7 years without any chance of recovery was left with Starfield in a room, and he got up to turn it off. That's right, Todd Howard performs a miracle. Now, granted, this does not mean Starfield Terran Armada is actually good. On the contrary, it's actually extremely shit. It's literally made for the same people who think Starfield already is not an abomination upon God's creation. And, well, it's sad because that just means that a lot of people have absolutely no idea what quality is. In fact, it looks like they're an anathema to what quality means.
Salutations, everybody. It is Maddie here today. Hope you're all doing absolutely excellent. Today, we are gathering to talk about Starfield's newest DLC as I'm delivering my final verdict on it. We're talking about Terran Armada, which is going for $10, as well as the new Free Lanes update. It's a bit of a mixed bag. There's actually a lot of stuff in here that I enjoyed more than I expected. I enjoyed the loot grind a little bit and hunting down X-Tech. I loved that this DLC just pushed me into space fight after space fight after space fight. I love using my ship in Starfield. I also love the nature of docking ships, and I feel like they made good...
Well, we found the only person in the universe who likes space battles in Starfield. Ain't that cool?
Use of that here. There's some good, fun stuff in the new content that's been added to Starfield. We'll no doubt talk about that. I think if you liked Starfield, what you've got here with a combination of Free Lanes and Terran Armada is doing more for the core Starfield experience than anything Shattered Space, even in its best state, could have done. However, the bad news, there are problems here both technically and content-wise and implementation-wise that are a bit rough around the edges. There are bugs, as you'd expect, some more frustrating than others. There is broken enemy AI at times, which reminded me a lot of Fallout 76.
Yeah, that means that they literally didn't fix the AI in the first place. Nice.
And I don't know why this is an issue this deep into Starfield's lifespan, especially when I hadn't noticed this before. Frame rate was a problem for me at times. The execution of the Terran Armada story was just not good, and I don't mean that from a Bethesda bad writing angle, but there's a formula to Starfield storytelling that is very apparent with this questline, and I think they need to start shaking it up for their players, especially since to access Terran Armada, it's recommended you're level 50 plus, so by the time you play...
Listen, I don't think this is true. I don't think anyone at Bethesda would be smart enough to actually be able to repeat step-by-step something that was previously done. Okay? I think that that's the brutal reality.
You've seen Starfield's tricks. Cruise mode does help the game. At the same time, the way it's implemented is really weird, and the list goes on. So it kind of goes back and forth. The best news I can deliver to you is simply this. I'm not walking out of it like, oh my god, it's awful, like something such as Shattered Space. But I wish there were less issues, and also, of course, if you don't like Starfield, Bethesda made this pretty clear that it's going to be doubling down on what's...
Listen, you know what's the funniest part about Terran Armada? It's the fact that you're supposed to be level 50 when you... go and do this expansion, which means even if this expansion was actually good, it was fun, which again, impossible, but imagine Bizarro World where Bethesda actually makes a game that's not instantaneously obviously hateable just from the launch trailer. I know, that's a hard task, but I mean, imagine. You still need to play the base game to get to level 50, and the base game is completely garbage. So even if the expansion is good, people still need to suffer through the absolute pinnacle slop that is Starfield vanilla.
Here for Starfield, not overhauling those systems. And yeah, if you didn't like Starfield, this is going to change that. I think they were pretty clear on that, and after playing everything that's involved here, yeah, they were right on the money about that. So let's talk about it, ladies and gentlemen. If you're new here and you're into what's going on with Starfield, consider subscribing. Let's talk about some of those high-level issues first. Frame rate. Not sure what happened here. I play Starfield on my Series X. I played it in performance mode, and this was dipping like a son of a bitch. I don't know what was going on, dude. Like, it was way more often than it's ever been. So just something's got to get ironed out there. Enemy AI. This was the most frustrating because... they have some...
Okay, I think I finally figured out what's the problem with this gun. Because, again, keep in mind, the people at Bethesda are afraid of guns, so the people designing guns have, you know, it's bad. So, look at this.
The most
look. When you shoot
frustrating because
with this gun, I figured out what's the problem. The people at Bethesda are so god-awfully incompetent that they made the recoil look like it's going down. Like it's going down. The reason the recoil for guns goes like this is not because that's how it works. That's just simply because your hand is harder to move like this than this. That's it. That's it. And in Starfield, they made it that recoil goes like this down. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Okay? Honestly, I think this alone makes the Fallout 4 gun design seem normal.
they have some really good firefights in this DLC where the room is swimming with enemies and zero gravity turns on, everyone's floating. And the way that Terran Armada and Free Lanes have been designed is that it really got me engaging with a lot of Starfield systems. So you're using your starborn powers more. That sort of stuff is awesome. So when the enemy AI is non-responsive, where you like light up a room of all these different Terran Armada bots, and then you go into the next room and everyone's just kind of hanging out like they had no idea what was going on, and then they engage with you. That stuff just breaks you out of it. It happens all the time. Other times enemies would just walk away or just not shoot you. So something's up with the enemy AI. Again, I don't know why it's like this deep into the game's lifespan. There were some quest bugs, such as just waiting for your follower to progress the quest, even though they were right next to the objective. And the way I fixed this was by shooting and downing my own teammate, and then they got back up and just, I guess, reset and completed the objective. Truly the definition of like turning it off and turning it back on again. Some objectives didn't update, and other times the scanner didn't really guide me to my objective. It's really easy during the Terran incursions, which we'll talk about a little bit later, to get spun around on some of these ships when you're inside them. And so usually what you do when you get spun around in Starfield is just open your scanner, look at the ground, and follow the line out the door. But for some reason, when you're aboard these starships, that scanner sometimes doesn't work. So you'll just be following the waypoint and it'll lead you to a hallway with a door that's locked. And you'll be like, okay, don't know how to get out of here. And you look at your scanner, it won't guide you out. And you'll find out that your exit was on like the other side of the ship. So that might not be a bug, but just bad design. But that combines into an issue unto itself. So there's some high level stuff here. But let's talk a little bit about
Boys, listen, you know I'm gonna lose my shit when I see a pipe like this. This is supposed to be like a military ship. What do we have? I don't know, we have some kind of control room or whatever, and there's like there's whatever this is called. A hotel trolley? I don't fucking know. And a pipe that go, well, why? Starfield just seems that every location in Starfield feels like it's just being built because of the amount of random trash in every room. Like, look at this. Like, look at this.
That combines into an issue unto itself. So there's some high level stuff here, but let's talk a little bit about Terran Armada. What you have here with the story is basically lore that's more interesting than the actual storytelling itself. What happened here is during the Colony Wars, two sides met at a star system and they ended up disappearing. Now, the thought was that they destroyed each other, but it turns out that they allied and formed the Terran Armada, which they claim to be the true children of Earth. You first learn about them through like a radio broadcast, which I thought was really...
By the way, just the premises of this is, needless to say, mega autistic.
Cool. You go out to investigate, and it turns out that they've taken over a spa club that's on a starship. And I thought this was a really sick location, like a really cool idea that actually was executed upon quite well. I say this because I think about the casino that you could find in base game Starfield and how it was so disappointing to just find that there destroyed and that like you couldn't explore it or use it. It had my hopes high for more locations like this throughout the story. But it turns out that what they'd end up doing is leaning really heavily into the Terran incursions, which not only pads out the story a little bit, but starts to recycle locations because it's a radiantly called objective. Again, something that we'll be visiting later. So really, this first location you visit is the most distinct.
Bethesda heard people hate Radiant quests over and over and over and over and over and over, and guess what? Over and over again. What did they do? Yes, let's implement Radiant quests even more deeply ingrained into the design of the game. Yes.
That you get, and it kind of lifts you up like, okay, that was actually pretty good. only to sort of settle into a very familiar Starfield rhythm. To the storyline itself, though, the Terran Armada robots are cool and all, but I think they need A, more humans to drive the story, and B, more visually distinct models of these Terran Armada soldiers. Like, I think about the droids in something like Star Wars, right? Where you have like the droidicas, the super battle droids, you have different forms of the battle droids themselves. And it felt like they just only went with that last option for the Terran Armada, where they could have really like ramped it up with some threatening robots, and they kind of slacked on that. But when it comes to the actual storytelling,
there is actually a lore explanation for this, presumably, and that's the fact that the robots that they use were not militarily intended to begin with. Bro, you had a lot of time to actually, fucking turn them militarily intended in that case, you know?
itself, if Starfield is any indication, Bethesda desperately needs a rethinking on their style of storytelling, and I'm not even coming from the angle of someone who doesn't like Bethesda writing across the board like many do. With Starfield, it's always that you end up working with like just one side, and at the very end of the quest, the antagonistic force rises from the shadows, attempts to change your views at the last minute, and it leads to a choice with very minimal weight because you barely even know the opposite side presenting such choice. Either that or the bad side is the bad side, which is exactly what they kind of define and choose to design Terran Armada as. Like, there is no getting to know and befriend the enemy here. So that is one of two Starfield story formulas, and I don't think there is a formula to storytelling, but Bethesda has one with this game, and especially given this is late game content, like you have to be level 50 plus, it's recommended to try this stuff out. This is a problem because it keeps the storytelling formula going for Starfield. It's one thing if you want to keep the gameplay formula going, but the storytelling formula, they should have shaken it up. I hope in their next story they explore the characters of all sides for something more cohesive that sticks the landing at the end and actually explores everything it's presenting, because it just felt kind of untapped.
A lot of people think this is the end for Starfield after the absolute disaster that it was. Because keep in mind, this was something that Microsoft officially announced that had, was it 30 million or 40 million players? Not paying customers though, but players, okay? How, like, what are we dealing with here? Is this the end of Starfield? Because keep in mind, like, the fact that the fact that Bethesda themselves have literally just decided that they're not even gonna call this a DLC. They're just gonna call it an update. This is just like an update. Obviously, it's a lie. This is a DLC. This was fully intended to be like a Shattered Space type of thing. It's called Terran Armada. This should be a DLC expansion. But it's not. Because Bethesda knows it's going to completely crash and burn. I mean, I looked at the Steam DB charts. This is barely improving the player base from 6,000 to 20,000. Not really great. Not really good. Granted, is this better than Shattered Space's numbers? I don't actually remember. I did not check. I'm assuming no. In either case, it doesn't matter because this is not moving the needle. It's still there and dead. The needle's dead. And nothing can change it at this point. Todd Howard literally removed his name from this. Previously, this was Todd Howard Starfield. Now it's just Starfield. He legitimately just removed his name from it and moved away from it. He doesn't talk about it. He doesn't mention it. Bethesda doesn't mention it. Is there a future for Starfield even at this point? People think no. And I kind of understand that because it does seem like no would be the correct answer.
At the same time, there is a benefit to this DLC, and it's that you actually get your money's worth. I spent like 6 hours on just Terran Armada alone. Granted, again, some of that is padded with the Terran incursions, but when I think about how Shattered Space showed up, $30, 4-hour main story mode, yeah, that was extremely disappointing. So I like that I got my money's worth here, especially because I had fun doing the Terran incursions. I just wish the story was better. Especially, listen to some of the music here when you're aboard a Terran Armada ship. It's like this brooding Star Wars stuff.
I would say this is completely misplaced and more feels like something medieval, but I mean, what do I know? Yeah, I don't know. I listened to that and I'm thinking, okay, I'm entering a temple of an old god.
I love that because I felt like Starfield's music just lacked a soul, and this felt like it had a soul. And so it's so frustrating that they have these elements surrounding what could be a really interesting faction and they don't explore it enough. The good news is that this DLC, combined with what's going on in free lanes, kind of comes together to have you engage with every system Starfield has. And it is well designed on that level where it even had me, someone who's, I would say, pretty seasoned with Starfield with over 100 hours in the game, engaging with systems I barely touched or cared about. I mentioned using the Starborn powers. Never did that, but thanks to Quantum Essence and quickly being able to regen my Starborn powers, I was using combinations like knocking someone down, then slowing down time.
Which completely, by the way, trivializes and makes nothing useful. The Starborn powers completely trivialize the game. There is no counter to them. They are blatantly, completely overpowered, and most of them are garbage. Except like two. Slowing down time and, knocking people off. That's it! That's it! That's it! That's it! The combat in this game is already completely trivial and garbage. You see that right there, that right there is an elite enemy because it has 3 health bars. No, actually, I think it's 4 health bars instead of 1. You know how combat with these enemies looks? You shoot them, doesn't matter with what, or maybe you melee hit them because you have autism, and they stagger. And then they stagger again. They don't even fight against you. It's just a giant stagger. It is stagger, 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 stagger again, dead. That's it. So the combat here is already trivial because keep in mind, every enemy that's not an elite like this, and I'm pretty sure in Starfield there are no situations, not one situation, where you actually encounter 2 elite enemies at the same time. So all the basic enemies just die effectively from 2 hits and don't do anything. And the ones that don't are just, bullet sponges that need to be staggered. And that's it. So the combat by default is already completely trivial. Beyond trivial, in fact. But the powers now make it even more trivial. By the way, the powers already previously made it trivial. But now that since the powers are better, it's even worse.
Over and over. And that was fun, especially because with the new legendary enemies, yeah, they can sometimes be bullet sponges, but it did also encourage me to use those powers a little bit more. I was upgrading my ship more than ever before. It felt really good when I got that right combination of like speed and strength and went into starship fights that originally I was getting decimated in with my weak ship and just tearing it up. It also made X-Tech quite useful because I set up a ship optimization terminal in my Kepler and went in there, upgraded my energy weapons, and continued to shred. I ended up upgrading my weapons a little bit more because it started to feel kind of needed for the later parts of the quest line, and I thought to myself,
do you think this is engaging? Are you enjoying what you're seeing right in front of you? Obviously not.
This was the thing I expected not to like the most, and I'm not going to be out here grinding Starfield for thousands of hours, don't get it twisted, but it did work for this questline, and I can see how it will add to Starfield in the later part of its life. I even shamefully dove into Outposts and started to build things, store things. I actually started to engage with parts of the game that I didn't really like. There are even quality of life enhancements that were originally introduced in like this database menu, but you can do things like seek out specific materials or specific planets even. And so sometimes like the way the star map works in Starfield is so annoying. So I really like this database menu because now it's like you want to go to this planet or this system. You're looking.
Sometimes the base game is just bad.
For this Terran incursion, it's really easy to just pick it instead of like trying to rotate the star map to a specific way to select what you're looking for. So I think overall, it does accomplish getting me into various loops and kind of just playing Starfield. With that, all of it's not perfect. Cruise mode is introduced here and it works kind of. Like the implementation is weirder than expected and I gotta be honest, had me confused for a while. What happens is you can enter cruise mode. When I'm playing on Xbox, you hold the left bumper. When you hold the left bumper and enter cruise mode, you're starting to go really fast across the star.
This is, by the way, worse than fast travel because cruise mode effectively removed one loading screen. That's right. Instead of averaging 5 to 6 loading screens from going planet to planet, now you have one less. And you know what's the funniest part about this? You know what's the funniest part? Boys, listen, you're not gonna fucking believe this. Of course you're gonna believe this. It's Bethesda we're talking about. This fast travel is slower than the extra loading screen. Yes. And more annoying and tedious. Yes, this fast travel is slower than the extra loading screen.
Our system you're within. So from there, you can see all the different planets that you can go to, and they're many light years away. And it'll take a while to get there, even when you continuously, regularly boost toward that planet or toward that moon, wherever you're going to. It's going to take a while to get there. You can set it on autopilot, stand up in your ship, go around, upgrade stuff. But if you just want to go from point A to point B, then this is going to take some time. It's interesting, though, because it does remove some loading screens from Starfield, and you can see that in the Terran Armada content. One thing they did that I thought was quite smart is that I tried to fast travel to some of the Terran incursions. When you do, they jump systems, and the only way that you can approach a Terran incursion is basically by, I would say, sneaking up on them, entering cruise mode, and jumping right into the planetary area that they're on. I like this a lot because it means that instead of fast traveling to an objective in Starfield, you actually just travel to it. So this does help a little bit. It's just that I wish the whole game was based around this rather than just this content. Because once you exit Terran Armada, I feel like cruise mode is this thing that's kind of like a, I don't want to do loading screen, so I guess I'll do it this way rather than driving some content through it. Every 5 light years, you're going to see a new ship appear. Sometimes they stop you, sometimes they don't. I like when things stop you in this game because now when you're using cruise mode, those occurrences are a bit interesting. I did find myself engaging with base game content, Starfield stuff I had completely missed. And that was mainly because I was drifting from system to system with relative ease. But at the same time, you're going to see more radiantly called stuff than ever before, which is why I say all of this is a bit of a mixed bag. If you're like me, you enjoy
Saying you're gonna see more Radiant stuff is not good. That's typically where people get turned off.
enjoyed base game Starfield, it's not like you're ignoring these faults. They're still in your face, arguably more so now. But if you hated it, I think you're going to dislike it even more because there's just more of that stuff now. At the same time, it does fill in some of the cracks in there. It feels
So for the 90% of people who hated Starfield, now I'm being generous. Very generous, in fact, because Starfield has lost 98.5% of its player base. Well, now technically they have 6%, 6.6% of their player base, which is from their all-time peak, which is wow, amazing, Starfield, good on you. You're doing it, champ. Woohoo, Todd Howard, woohoo. This is not gonna work, obviously.
there's more going on, a little bit more zip to the game, and I do appreciate that. I've talked about these Terran incursions a lot. Let's get into those. You can actually change the frequency of them in your gameplay options. You can completely turn them off, or you can ramp them all the way up. So I found them to be kind of fun events because they get me into the things I enjoy most with Starfield. Particularly, I love being in my ship and shooting other ships in this game. I felt base game Starfield just didn't...
Wait, notice how no one has ever talked about Starfield and how fun the leveling system is? How fun the guns are? How fun anything honestly is? No one has even tried to fake it that they have liked it.
Didn't have enough of that. This feeds you starship fights so often, and I really like that because it's, again, just the best feeling part of the game. The way the ship controls, the way the upgrades work, the starship building system. Like, it's easily the most impressive part of the game, and this leans fully into that. And there's a variety of Terran incursions. A lot of the times it'll be dock on the ship after clearing out some escort ships. You'll find 3 authorization codes. You'll shut something down in the ship and you'll run out and it'll blow up in the distance. Sometimes you actually go to the planet itself, and that was really cool, finding like a Terran starship docked on the moon of some planet. It was just like a really awesome visual. But you'll go and...
But we already have had that. That's in the base game. You have events where a ship just comes down to the surface and 3 pirates move from it.
inside there and destroy it from the inside. You're always doing what I described in our preview as what you'd find in Star Wars Battlefront, where you'd like fly into the Empire ship, go to the back end and destroy all the core systems and take out the ship from the inside. That's basically what you're doing here. At first, it works really well. It continues to work well, but again, it's set up to be repeatable content. So what ends up happening is something that's quite fun that you can opt into becomes main storyline content. And I found this to be a really silly crutch for Bethesda to choose to lean on, because you choose to do the incursions as this fun event and the whole story leans on it. So it's like, hey, once you're done with your incursions, here's more incursions for your incursions. And I just felt like that wasn't a good call.
Oh, really? Oh, really? The Radiant quest that you hailed as great not even 5 minutes ago turns out are not good? Well, ain't that eye-opening? I would have never expected this personally, obviously, because you see, my 2 brain cells are fighting for last place.
These were something that they introduced through the main storyline, which they do, and then it was up to you when you wanted to go engage with them, but the storyline was built around something completely separate. That would have been much, much better, but instead, they lean into the incursions, which I think are a good system for the game, and I say this as someone who doesn't really like Radiant content in Bethesda games, but because I like the starship fighting, I want to do these a little bit more often, but the game forces them upon you, so I feel some people will resent them more than they actually should because of the way Bethesda designed the storyline where they're introduced. Terran Armada does introduce some brand new military-styled weapons, which is good. You definitely needed more of those because the loot in Starfield, its pool is really thin, and especially after playing a game like Outer Worlds 2, Bethesda, you need to really, anyone from Bethesda watching this who works on weapons, works on implementing those ideas, play Outer Worlds 2.
Outer Worlds 2 is arguably worse than Starfield. Maybe don't play it.
Take note of how many unique weapons and armor sets are there. Please, for the love of God, just pay attention to that. You need to catch up on that, because the problem is I was starting to see repeat legendary items. And again, dude, you finish the Terran Armada quest line. You would think by this point, here's something unique for your efforts. Nothing. This game leans even harder than 76. At least 76, I have unique weapons and armor all over the place that I eventually get from quest lines. They seem to get it more than Starfield does. Starfield needs more uniques. I would take that over anything right now. The new military weapons are great. Re-rolling legendary ranks and making your weapon better and getting attached to that, cool and all. But give us uniques with unique properties, unique looks. I know it's more on the asset side of things, but it's so desperately needed. They did add new points of interest, but if it wasn't already apparent, these are also Radiant. I kind of mentioned ships. It's the same thing on the ground where there are a couple new ones, but you just kind of see them in the list of all the other Radiantly called objectives. So there's nothing that I think really will wow you on that front. And this is where I put on my understanding cap. When you really look at it and assess the game, you think to yourself, the biggest mistake was the 1,000 planets. That will forever haunt Starfield. If Bethesda had infinite resources, even if they wanted to add something to all of these different planets and make all of them worth exploring, if you just added one location to almost all of these planets, you're talking about 1,000 locations. And that's just not feasible in year 2.5 of its lifespan. So I get why their idea was just adding new POIs like this. It just isn't going to ever feel the same, though, compared to a traditional Bethesda experience, and that's kind of what Starfield is. What I found to be a little bit disappointing on implementation was the action figures. They find these procedurally as well. I thought, okay, they're going to put these on the main storyline, certainly, like they do with the Vault Tech bobbleheads. No, when I finished one of my Terran incursions, one of the action figures for a UC Marine was in the loot chest, and I'm like, oh, God, I just find these randomly? Certainly, I hope that's not the case, and it's just for some of them, but I found that to just be a little bit disappointing.
I have no idea what the hell this is, but I mean, if you're gonna collect them, can you give me everything you own? Because clearly you should not be trusted with money or decision making or have rights in general. I mean, it's blatantly obvious.
But they're there. Happy to set them up in my little action figure playset. I like that stuff. But again, why procedurally? Why? Bethesda just seems so afraid of people missing things. But all in all, I had fun with some of the content that's here.
I think this is a problem with most companies that once were good and now are garbage. Blizzard is a shining example of this also. all of these companies, for some reason, believe that their player bases are just fucking stupid. There's no other way to describe it. They just believe that the players are gonna not be able to figure stuff out, even though that stuff is super simple. And then for the stuff that is very unintuitive because these people are bad at their jobs and making games, that stuff has no explanations. Like in World of Warcraft, there's so much stuff that has explanations, how it works, blah, blah, blah. And then there's stuff that you actually really care about and it has absolutely no fucking explanations at all. It's so strange. And all of these companies do the same thing. It's always that. It's always these companies just think that we're too stupid to be able to understand something. And this is why they do it.
There's some friction still, but I think Bethesda has smoothed it out. I found the X-Tech gameplay loop to actually be more compelling than I expected. I enjoyed starship fighting a lot. I enjoyed the atmosphere and the vibe of Terran Armada. I wish this story was better, though. You see what's happening? Everything I have to say kind of comes with a catch, comes with a caveat. That's unfortunate. And I wish I could walk away from this saying more than it was decent.
By the way, everyone's saying good things about the X-Tech stuff. Make no mistake, by the way, the X-Tech stuff is literally the equivalent of just a level up mechanic almost. But instead of, getting it once after a certain amount of time and, things killed, you get a trickle of it periodically and then you get to make something better. Yes. It's that simple. It's just a progression system that actually progresses you in a feelable way. Crazy stuff. And this is literally the best mechanic that Starfield has. Because the default level system is somehow made bad. Again, I talked about this before. Starfield was not the first game that I didn't give a shit that I leveled up, but it was one of, it was close to it. It was one of the first big games where it was the first Bethesda game where I did not care that I level up. When you're playing Fallout, every time you get a level up, you're like, wow, leveled up, whoa, new points, new skills, new talents. But in Starfield, I remember I got a level up and I'm like, oh, level up, nice. And I open up the thing and it's like, oh. I leveled up 5 times, but I didn't notice. Whoops. Because it's boring. And then I put points into some kind of garbage that's also boring and probably doesn't work, by the way. Because most talents don't actually work in Starfield.
I never expected to be coming in here glowing. In fact, I was expecting to come in here kind of being like, yeah, it's just not for me. So I'm happy I found some enjoyment in it. I'm happy to say it's not as bad as something like Shattered Space, but I think the long term on how I feel about Terran Armada, again, will come down to the frequency of content. Keep in mind, again, we haven't heard anything from Bethesda in over a year on this game. If this is going to be an annual thing, I think Bethesda's going to need to do more, and my opinion over time on things like Terran Armada will no doubt sour. Like, okay, we waited over a year, we got this, and then nothing for a year. However, if it's going to go in the 76 direction, where there are going to be multiple smaller content beats and then maybe some big content beats every once in a while, cool. And I think that Terran Armada and more like this could be fun for the game.
It's never gonna go in the 76 direction, by the way, aka update-wise, because some people don't really know this, but 76 did not have any updates until it got popular because of the TV show Season 1. Like, 76 had an update every fucking 2 years. A minor update that wasn't really that good or that impressive or anything. It got an update like every 2 years. Only since the Fallout TV show got popular and pushed a bunch of new tourists into 76, then it got updates. Only then it got updates. So, considering Starfield is dead and no one's gonna play it, and no one wants to play it, and there's no TV show that's gonna save it, there's not going to be any updates because Bethesda doesn't care about failures. Which is strange because their whole brand at this point is a giant failure. So, I mean, Guess they don't care about anything at all.
Just to wrap things up, I got some quality of life suggestions for Bethesda here because I think there's still more to be done. If you're going to make Starfield a looter shooter, which it basically is now, you need a loot all option. I was looking for X-Tech on literally every body, and I was thinking to myself, okay, like obviously they're turning this into like a resource gathering type of game, a legendary weapon gathering type of game. Instead of me looking through every individual body, just, you know, call all the bodies that are dead in a certain area. Let me loot all of them at once. That would be really awesome.
That's a 76 thing, by the way.
Some 76 already does that. It makes looting a breeze. It's really appreciated. I think Starfield would benefit from this a lot, so I can just grab all the X-Tech that's in the room and keep moving on, or whatever I want. Credits, whatever it may be. Next, dude, if you overhaul the Digipick system, this will be one of the easiest W's you got right now. It's just not good. It takes too long and is relied upon too heavily for both hacking and lockpicking. Combined with random...
No. The Digipick system is fucking genius. Let me explain you why. This is literally an IQ test. If you're playing Starfield and it's your 10th Digipick thing and you can't solve it instantaneously even though there's like 15 fucking options, and you have taken the thing that does the first two for you automatically, which is very nice and should be always picked because that's smart. The Digipick system is literally an IQ test. If you can't fucking nail this thing down in 10 attempts, well, after 10 tries, 10 encounters with it, and you don't know how it's designed, if you can't just intuitively figure this out instantaneously, you failed the IQ test, boy, okay? It's off the special ed with you, okay? The education system is calling for you, okay? Tylenol was probably involved, okay? My God.
Gen loot, and I actively avoid this feature.
I also huff a paint thinner when I wake up.
Any point I can. I literally sigh when I see a door locked by it, and I have to use this system. I hate the Digipick system. Bethesda, I use hate very sparingly, but it's bad. You gotta redo this one. Either that or make it really easy to open doors, because it really, like, put it in the gameplay options. I would turn it off and take the XP debuff. Lastly, I think there needs to be more of an on-screen alert when your health is low. I turned up the game to hard, got rinsed a couple of times, started to realize the game kind of just doesn't communicate to you when your health is low. Wish it did that a little bit better. But overall, I'm curious to see how often we see Starfield in 2026. Will this be it for the year? If so, my opinion will gradually shift into a not so happy place, because I think the game needs work, but what this DLC does...
Yeah, I think it's over. I think that's literally it. Anyway, that was Mr. Matty Plays 10 out of 10. Bye.